What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And I am a certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And it's Wednesday night, and I'm becoming to say that this is Black Lady Magic night. Because at 7 o'clock, I have the wonderful Aisha K. Staggers on, usually giving her takes on the social political climate of the United States of America. And then we end the evening with the sorors, as well I've been told to call them now. The sorors from Florida and the sorors from Bolivia. We have Dr. Tachi, and we also have Lia from Bolivia in her Syracuse orange. That's right. Representing her Syracuse orange, and we've had some great conversations over the last few weeks, and we're going to continue it on because they're delivering great conversation and bringing great conversation topics. So I'm just in the background here. So Dr. Tachi and
yes,
Lia. But Dr. Tachi, you have a very interesting conversation topic tonight, and to be honest, I didn't even know much about it. I had to do some research on it, but it's a pretty hot topic. So yes, you brought the conversation to light, so I'm going to have you lead. So what are we going to be sharing about tonight?
Oh, hopefully a whole bunch of stuff. I envision, as usual, being it being an epic conversation because you always bring it, Dr. Vibe. But I was really interested in this topic because personally I have the experience of not only having gone to a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, and attended an HBCU, historically black college or university, but I have also taught at historically black colleges and taught at PWI'S and taught at a Hispanic serving institution, taught at so I've taught at the gamut of different types of schools. So I feel like if anyone has the right to speak on this, it's me, because I have the and I'm very passionate about it. So what was interesting was Coachella was, I think, now three weeks ago, and the interesting thing was Beyonce's performance. That was the talk of the entire Coachella, not just because she's Beyonce, but also because of the theme of her particular performance. Her theme was an HBCU themed performance, based off of the quote-unquote show bands that HBCUs have. So we tend not to have just regular marching bands. We have show bands, which are really about entertainment. So that's really where this emanated from, where I was interested in the whole conversation and how people felt about her use of HBCU culture, her use of Black Greek lettered culture. So that's kind of where this idea started.
Excellent. Well, Lia, I know that you went to an HBCU. No, she did. That's right. My correction, she didn't. But let me ask, was there ever any interest for you to go to an HBCU?
There was. My experience has been strictly at PWI'S, some of the best in the United States. Not only PWI'S, but also Ivy League PWI'S. So that in itself is a completely different experience, I think, to some extent. But I did have some interest once I got into college, but I really didn't have any interest when I was in high school looking at going to college, just because I had no exposure. And because I'm biracial, I grew up with my white side of the family who, of course, they probably were aware of what HBCUs were, but they're white. So it didn't really enter into their psyche to consider going to an HBCU just because it wasn't part of their culture. They had never been exposed to Black Greek life, never been exposed to the band culture of HBCUs. So for me, I didn't really think about it until I was already in college and through different organizational activities or just road tripping and go to parties at different schools, meeting friends from different parts of the United States, many from the DC, DMV, Maryland, Virginia area, and hearing about Howard, Hampton, Cheney, all the different schools, did I start to get an idea of what an HBCU was. And its appeal to me started to grow after I was already in college, and really at that point, it was, I don't want to say too late, but it was too late for me to, move during my undergraduate experience because I was doing just fine at Syracuse.
Okay. Tachi, did you attend an HBCU? And if you did,
yes.
Was it by choice, and what was your experience?
I went to the Mecca, Howard University. But the interesting thing is my undergraduate experience was at a PWI at the State University of New York at Buffalo, and which is a very large PWI, a large research institution. And I actually wanted to attend Howard University undergrad, but my mother was really set on me staying close, which is why I ended up going to the University of Buffalo. And I actually applied to a lot of different schools, mostly PWI's and then 2 HBCU'S. But Howard was actually my top choice. And I had decided then, I said, oh, that's fine. I can stay here now. But be for damn sure, as soon as graduation comes, I'm going to Howard. So I knew that I was going to Howard for graduate school. And I'm so glad that I did. I think here's my take on it as a faculty member. I think that as a student, you need to go to the institution that best speaks to the field you want to enter, where the people are doing the work of the field that you want to enter, and where you're going to feel the most comfortable. So I do realize going to an HBCU is not necessarily for every student. I understand that. Speaking for me, I would not be the scholar that I am today had I not attended Howard University for graduate school. They give a level and have a level of personal stake in your achievement that I have not seen at a PWI. And that's not to say that it does not exist, but here's the key difference: the faculty. When you go to a PWI, the faculty is not diverse at all. You're lucky if you are taught by anybody of color, depending on what field you're in. And because of that, you have faculty that may be able to sympathize, but they can't empathize with your experience. Going to Howard, you knew right away, first of all, you had that African American, you're not going to get out there and make me ashamed. So you were fine and upright from the beginning. But then there's this level of mentorship that is unparalleled. And again, this is not saying that you cannot get good mentorship in a graduate program or at all at a PWI. You absolutely can. But I think the mission of HBCUs is different, where their mission is to educate and uplift the Black community, Black communities around the diaspora. And so there's a huge difference. For me, it was wonderful. I'll say quickly also that I got tired of being a Black student and I wanted to be a student. I got tired of seeing the N-word scrawled in desks and being felt to be less than, however you say that, feeling like I was less than, or people putting that into your minds or trying to impress upon you. Of course, I knew I wasn't, but you got tired of fighting it. I was also a student leader. I was the president of the campus NAACP, and every 5 minutes something was happening. That wears on your spirit. It's like, damn, can I just be? And that's what Howard allowed. Howard allowed me to be. Howard allowed me to put all these other things out of the way. Now, mind you, we were studying Black people and we were studying diasporic communication and things like that. So you're fully aware of what you're studying and what the mission is. But at the same time, you're just allowed to be a student. And it is so freeing. So that was my experience. I always tell people that my experience, my graduate experience at Howard, to me, was my college experience. When people ask me, oh, where did you go to school? I say Howard. I don't say two pims about the University of Buffalo, usually.
She's on fire tonight, Lia?
For sure. But when is she not on fire?
There you go. There you go. Lia, what has your reaction been to this subject as it seems to have raised its head over the last few weeks in social media? What has your thought process and responses been?
Well, my thought process is that this is not a new conversation. It's just the latest version of the same conversation that people have been having for the last, several decades. And, where I kind of fall down on the issue is I don't think PWIs are better than HBCUs, and I don't think HBCUs are better than PWIs. I think it really boils down to what you, the individual, want out of your college experience. I definitely resonate with some of the things that Dr. Tachi was saying about the desire to feel anonymous. I've wanted that feeling my entire life. I'm tired of being the one that stands out. I'm tired of being the one who is the token. I'm tired of seeing, you know, racist incidents, just like Dr. Tachi said, and I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that I'm also very active as a student leader. I was on the board of trustees at Syracuse as a student representative. I was in the student government for my entire time. On the elections board, I was part of the Student African American Society on the executive board, in addition to becoming a Delta later on in my college career, but I also played intramural sports, and I was very, very active because that's just the way I've always been. But I always stood out because at PWI'S, it's a PWI, so you're going to be in the minority, so you are going to stand out. But what I found at Syracuse, and I think that this is not unique to many PWI institutions, is that we created our own spaces and we created our own experiences. So even though we don't have the luxury of being anonymous or just being a student, we did have the space to be ourselves, because there were enough of us, thankfully, at a school the size of Syracuse University and schools like that, where there is a statistically significant amount of African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and everybody else. And so we would all come together kind of around that, to the point where now Syracuse University, and I think other universities, but I think Syracuse is one of the first, there's enough minority alumni that we have our own alumni programs and our own alumni get-togethers, and we call it Coming Back Together, CBT. And that's every 2 years. We basically, 2 to 3 years, we all go back to campus, and there's a whole weekend just for us. You know, scholarships that have been set up just for us, like for us, by us. And so for me, I never felt like I needed to pursue the HBCU experience once I found my way at Syracuse, because there were enough of us that I was able to feel safe in a space of people of color, learn more about that identity, explore my identity as a Black female. Even though I'm biracial, I still culturally associate myself as a Black woman. If people ask me that's how I identify, I'll tell people that I'm biracial because I won't negate any part of who I am, but I'm a Black woman. So, you know, for me, and like Dr. Tachi said, in PWI'S, you also find the problem of very non-diverse faculty, very non-diverse staff. But I chose personally to take African American Studies as one of my 2 majors as an undergrad, because I did not receive that education in my household, because my parents can't teach me what they don't know, and because the standard curriculum for secondary students in the United States really only goes from slavery to emancipation to the Civil War, and then boom, you're all of a sudden you're in the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. You don't really hear much else about African American contribution to American society or global society, except for the typical same Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. There's so much more than that. And I wanted to know that, because I knew one day I would be a mom and I would be imparting knowledge to my children, and I didn't want it to be so limited. And I knew that if I really wanted to know these things, I had to take it upon myself. And thankfully at Syracuse University, they do have a whole African American Studies department, and pretty much 90 or 99 to 100% of the faculty are Black, including the dean, including the administrative staff, including the librarian. We have our own library. So I definitely found like I could carve out safe spaces and find my own there without having to be alienated or deal with some of the BS that Dr. Tachi said she was dealing with all the time. Even though that did exist and still happens, because Syracuse recently had a hugely publicized racial incident with an engineering fraternity that was basically calling everybody out, and they had video, they caught it on video, and those guys have since been expelled, their house is being taken from them. So there's racial stuff going on constantly at PWI'S, and I do think that's a reality.
Well, just as usual, you ladies are on fire, and that's FIYAH. And want to say welcome to Divine Right. She's going, go SU, we bleed orange. Love my SU experience. We formed a bond-like family. And some other people have jumped in, so please feel free to make comments, ask questions. The Black Lady Magic duo will handle them as soon as they possibly can. Dr. Tachi, one of the things I've read about is some people are saying the educational system or the education received in an HBCU does not level or is not as good as a PWI. And you mentioned it briefly, but is that a myth that you continually hear?
Yes. And may I please say that those people may go and make stone soup at the gates of hell, because that is absolute rubbish. I don't think you understand how tired I am of hearing this. First of all, the fact that African Americans in this country are even able to have higher education is due largely in part to HBCUs, because you could not go anywhere else. You had a few examples of people that went to school in the North, but it was still a few, and they still tried like hell. Don't think that the North was all free. They still tried like hell not to have you go there, okay? So this is a recent thing of admissions into these types of, into quote-unquote PWI'S. This is a recent thing. Before that, what you had was HBCUs, and you were being educated. Let me make this plain. I'm tired of hearing that, because it's simply untrue, because the statistics prove otherwise. When large companies when they're looking to diversify their staff, where do they go? To HBCUs. This is where they go to find the best of the best. We are taught, first of all, in society, we're already taught that you have to do 100 times more than the non-melanated in order to get 1/10 as much. Okay, I've changed the numbers, but that's basically what it is, right? And so you're already operating from a standpoint of excellence. Okay, you're already operating from the fact that you have to be that excellence, because you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice to coast and go to parties necessarily all the time, although we do. But you don't have a choice to do that necessarily. You have to excel, and you must be excellent. Okay. From that standpoint is where the black student comes. And then from that standpoint is where the faculty members at these places come, because not only is their reputation on the line, there are things like accreditation on the line, et cetera, et cetera. So factoring all of that in, do you think that black students and black schools, HBCUs, actually have the time to sit there and engage in tomfoolery and not be excellent? Let's think a little bit, or as my mother likes to say, let's use a little bit of common sense. And the thing that I hate the most is not that this line of flawed thinking comes from the non-melanated. It comes from us.
That's what I wanted to drill down on.
It comes from us.
So what then is the root cause of that thought process from the melanated perspective? Where's that root coming from?
Oh, that non-melanated ice is colder. We've always thought that what is not ours is better, because that's what we've been taught. We have internalized that flawed way of thinking and have put it on every single thing we do, from designers to architects to schools. Everything we do, if it's done by us, it's somehow flawed. And that is the standpoint we operate from. As such, of course, if it is a school for us, run by us, we're going to find the flaws. And this is not to say that HBCUs are not flawed. They absolutely are, just like PWI'S. Schools have flaws. This is what I want people to know. But for some reason, we think my professor, one of my favorite professors at Howard, said this, that every time something leaks, people want to I forgot how he said it, but he said the point of every time something leaks, it has to be black, but then people come back and say it leaks because it's black, something to that effect. And so basically saying that this is flawed because it's black. And it doesn't matter that the same things may be happening. They may have leaks at other institutions, but it leaks because it leaks. But when it leaks black, it leaks because it's black. That's basically what he was saying. And so I'm tired of hearing this, and I see all these ignorant comments on Facebook, for example, by people that I actually know that are like, well, I didn't go to an HBCU and I don't feel offended. Well, you don't have to, Witch. That's fine. But what you won't do is denigrate what people like Kwame Nkrumah, people like Elaine Locke, people like Booker T. Washington, who founded Tuskegee Institute, regardless of what his politics were. What you won't do is denigrate their work. That's what you won't do. And I think it's a complete disrespect. You have your choice of not to go to those schools, but it's a complete disrespect to think that the scholarship is less than at these schools. How dare you? And by the way, most of the black faculty that you find in academia have been trained at HBCU'S. I'll sit down now.
Lia, can we just? I guess we can end the show now, right?
Basically, she said it all. Ain't nothing more to say.
Well, just to lighten it up for a few seconds, if anyone out there needs recommendations on earrings, come to these two ladies, please.
We did it again, didn't
we? Mind melt. I feel it. It's just can't help ourselves. Just can't help ourselves.
Sorors. There you go. No? That's I've incorporated that word into my.
It's a sisterhood, but it's also a telepathic connection.
It really is.
Wow.
We're in different continents, and this thing is happening. So.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh! I tell you, this is fantastic. Oh, and Divine Right says, "LOL, witch."
Exactly.
I say witch so that I don't say the other word.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Understood. So, Lia, did you feel regretful that you did not attend an HBCU?
No, I don't feel any regret. And it's because I had such a fulfilling experience at my undergraduate institution. I think if I had had any different experience than I had, I might have regretted it. But I think for me, just getting out of a predominantly white environment to an environment that had at least a little percentage of people of color was enough for me to start to get a sense of what the world would be like outside of my bubble. And so for me, I mean, and Divine Right can chime in on this. She already said we are like a family at Syracuse, like amongst the Black and Latino alumni in particular, because we basically found each other and we never let each other go. Even to the point now, years later as alumni, we still reach back to be like, what is going on? Like when we heard about this racist incident, we were all over it, to the point where the response of the university president was so immediate and so swift and so extreme. I think he heard our voices because we are actively involved in the daily current existence and life of the university. So for me, no, I don't feel any regret about not having gone to an HBCU whatsoever. I don't feel like I missed anything because I got what I needed in terms of that sense of community from the friends that I made and the relationships that I formed at Syracuse. If I had it to do over again, knowing now what I know about HBCUs, I might have done things a little differently. I might have gone with the route of Dr. Tachi, where I still went to a PWI for one of my degrees and then to an HBCU for another, just to sort of experience what it is like to have that I'm just a student experience and be part of my own people for us bias experience. But I am like Dr. Tachi in the sense that I think I will always be a lifelong learner, and I do have dreams of going into academia myself once I leave my diplomatic career, and that will likely require a PhD. And I've considered, hey, maybe I'll just go back to an HBCU to have that experience, because just like she said, most of the Black faculty, many of them, that you'll find in PWI'S have all been educated and trained in HBCU. And I feel like that would perfectly round out my academic experience from having gone to a PWI institution for an undergrad, an Ivy League institution for my grad school, and then adding in an HBCU. I mean, I feel like that would be the perfect sort of trifecta of academic experiences.
Wow. I'm just getting a vision here, attending a class where both of you are professors. Wow. I just have this vision, and if I would walk into a classroom and wouldn't even know who the professors were, and it was both of you two, I'd have a heart attack in a good way. I'd have a heart attack.
I'm already looking at Dr. Tachi for potential job opportunities, adjuncts,
Oh,
in her university, she could take me in her wing.
I got you, Soror. Don't worry.
There you go. So Divine Right.
I'm looking. My eyes are already looking.
Okay. Divine Right is saying HU has been in the news a lot in the DMV area, and what is crushing is the media is not focusing on the good and greatness that has and still is coming out of HU. And she also says, yes, love the earring game, sorors. And she also says, yes, ma'am, we are family. We are tight. 20 plus years later, SU is a different PWI. We all have our flaws, but we've had a dynamic experience.
She's right. She's totally right. I mean, that's where I met her. Serena's one of my dearest, oldest, and best friends. And we met at Syracuse. And my love for her and my relationship to her is just as strong now, if not stronger than it was when we met then. But being at a PWI, you automatically, I think, look for your own. So whereas at an HBCU, everywhere you look, you are your own. So you can kind of maybe follow more your friendship alliances based on your interests. Whereas at a PWI, where there's so few of you, you bond together regardless of the fact that maybe in the outside world you might not cross paths. You might be in different, social circles. But at a PWI, there's not enough of you to be that selective. So we all come together, and that's what made the experience so beautiful, because I have friends from Syracuse that literally are global, international, doing all kinds of fields. At the top of their fields, the network is strong. Like if I need somebody to help me with anything that I want to do, whether it's with my writing, with doing an interview, with something related to my field, if I want to get a speaking opportunity, all I have to do is go to my network from my Syracuse time, and it's already taken care of.
Okay.
It's kind of like being a Delta. Like if I need something and I say, hey, Chetachi, I need blah, 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 she's on it. We look out for each other. And that's the same experience that I had with the Black and Latino students at Syracuse, because we look out for each other because we had to survive in that environment.
Good stuff. Dr. Tachi, I've been in the research I've been doing, it seems that HBCUs are closing slowly but surely. And there's been a whole issue with your current government about funding of HBCUs. What are you seeing some of the challenges for HBCUs are in today's educational climate?
I think here's the thing. There are obviously definite challenges for HBCUs. I think there are challenges for colleges in general. There's less funding for education. We have an administration right now that really doesn't give two damns about education, and that filters not just nationally but down through the states, etc. I know here in Florida waste, but that our governor was talking about at some point that students should only major in certain things. So when you have that line of thinking, that tells you where they are in terms of education. So I think it's education in general that has challenges. That being said, there are particular challenges when it comes to HBCUs. So a couple of things. When you look at PWI'S, many of them have huge endowments where they're collecting millions and millions of dollars. HBCUs, for the most part, don't have those types of gifts. Why? Because part racism, right? So you don't have graduates that are amassing the same levels of wealth as graduates at PWI'S. Now, I'm just saying graduates in general. When you look at Black graduates from PWI'S, there's a totally different statistic and everything than when you compare them to their non-melanated counterparts. So just looking in general, that's an issue. The fact that these schools don't have large endowments, the fact that you have at some points dwindling enrollments, but not to be funny, the fact that Beyonce actually is going to do just the same thing that Different World did for the enrollments of HBCUs, this Coachella performance is doing for it. So you have students that may not have all ordinarily considered a HBCU taking a second look. Now, how sad is it that we have to have a pop culture icon or pop culture at all for us to appreciate our institutions? It is sad, but whatever helps. So I think that's those are some of the major things. The fact that you have graduates who don't give back sometimes or can't give back, depending on their situation. Some of it is involuntary, and some of it is like, now you could at least join your association, but then some of it is some of us just can't, and that affects the school's endowment, and we don't have that. We don't have the money to keep things going. So, there's a lot of things. And then you look at things like sports. Some of the large schools, like you went to Syracuse, okay, Lydia. So you look at sports, and a lot of schools, PWI'S that have large sports programs and winning teams, A lot of that is keeping the schools afloat. Look at the University of Alabama. First of all, look at any school in the South, University of Alabama, University of Tennessee, University of Georgia. Look at all of these schools and how the South loves their football.
Oh, yeah.
Football programs are really floating these schools, and I would say more than floating, because then you have alumni who give back because they love the sports team so much.
That's the hook.
That's the hook. But that's most we do have sports programs at HBCUs, of course, but we're largely also very academic. So that's another thing. We're not raising funding through sports programs like some PWI'S are. So there are a lot of different challenges, and it's multifaceted, but those are just two.
Anything you want to add to that commentary, Lia, at all?
Only that, I mean, I can't speak to the PWI experience, but I can say some of the things that I hear from some of my mentees who are grads of HBCUs are similar to the things that Dr. Tachi said. It goes back to like the issue that Howard has had with financial aid and sort of the
she's freezing on us.
Their students like they were supposed to. The other thing that I think goes back to the same funding issue is in the case of some HBCUs, their inability, because of instability of funds, to make sure that all their programs are diversified and accredited, which can also be problematic if a student wants to have a degree that actually is valid when they go out into the workforce. And that is something that some HBCUs struggle with. But also that's not unique to HBCUs. That has happened at PWI'S as well. It just seems to have a higher prevalence at certain HBCUs just because their financial fiscal solvency is sometimes more challenged than at PWI'S for many of the reasons that Dr. Tachi already outlined. Like, for instance, using Syracuse as an example, because it's what I know best, we have huge endowments to the point where we have families who are like, oh, I'm going to go buy a new building for the university. So that's a bit crazy to even conceive of that. And just like Dr. Tachi said, in terms of having the financial wherewithal to do something like that is very rare, regardless of your race. But in a place like Syracuse, which is actually one of the oldest colleges or universities in all of the United States, the lines and the historical roots go back a long way. So there's a lot of families that have gone there for generations and generations and generations, whereas at HBCUs, we can't say that even maybe 3 or 4 generations ago, our families were slaves. So we don't have the generational wealth that many of our white counterparts have in terms of being able to amass wealth over time, pass it down through the family tree to get to the point where they could say, hey, here's money for a building. So now go name that the Black House because I just paid for it. I don't have that kind of money, and most alumni don't. And one other thing that I would add, because Dr. Tachi covered everything that I would want to say on that particular question, is that it's the same phenomena at PWI'S. So even though PWI'S are maybe a little bit more stable because they have these endowments and they do have the sports teams that are D1, they're competing in the highest divisions. They get all of these sponsorships, especially in the NCAA tournaments and the bowls for football. And all these are the players that are going to go to the NBA and go to the NFL afterwards. So it's sort of like the training ground for our professional athletes. So the boosters come in and they pay for box seats that are thousands of dollars, and that money flows back into the university. In the absence of that, what do HBCUs have to bring in that level of regular income the way PWI'S do? I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's the question that many of them struggle with in terms of maintaining their financial viability. And another issue that I think HBCUs suffer too is because the funding is at times limited, they can't offer the same level of financial aid and support to students who are coming from families that would require that kind of financial support to send their kids to college. And that's where sometimes PWI'S end up pulling, people of color away because they do have money available for financial aid scholarships in a way that some HBCUs just don't.
Well, sorry.
Please do.
I just want to add something really quickly about Howard and then what Lia just said. So the thing with Howard, again, it's a case of it leaks because it's black. Obviously, the situation that happened is terrible. University of Buffalo just a few months ago before had a case of embezzlement with people that were there at the time that I was a student there. So they've been there for, a little while. And I'm like, these people are still there? And they're still stealing money? Those types of things. But those things are not as covered. And another thing is they have the machines to be able to cover these things up.
Exactly.
That's the thing. They have the PR, they have the machines, they can swing things any way they want. So it's not that these things don't happen at institutions like this. Are you kidding me? With the amount of money that's there, be for damn sure it does happen. But they are able to clean it up and cover it up in a way that some HBCUs can't, simply because they don't have that machine behind them. And then I think another thing that is troubling, again, I'm of the belief that you need to go to the institution that best suits you. I understand the fact and the thing about sometimes there's a lack of funding and sometimes there's a lack of money for students who wouldn't be able to afford. Boy, do we understand. We know that's the case. But it's sometimes troubling when you have families or students that are alumni of institutions like Harvard, et cetera, Ivy League, Big Ten, that are giving all this money to schools who are going to be okay anyway, and our schools suffer. Now, I understand that you may be an alumni or an alumnus of the school, and that makes sense. But then it's like, if you have it like that, do you not have a vested interest in making sure everybody does well? Because that's the Black way. We are a collective people. And you're not doing well if everybody, what good is it to have a mansion in the middle of the ghetto? To me, it makes no sense. So it just kind of puzzles me and troubles me, and I understand it, but then I'm like, well, we should not have any Black schools closing when you have this, and we by no means have the same amount of wealth as some of our non-melanated counterparts. I understand this, but there is enough of it that we should never have any Black schools closing.
Exactly. I agree with that last point.
Yeah, it's interesting because the more I'm thinking about it, the schools that concentrate on getting funding through sports and make sure sports is out front have the least concerns when it comes to finances, whereas HBCUs, which focus more on education, have more challenges getting financing. Is very, and maybe I'm out of whack, but it's going through my mind that...
No, you're right.
You're absolutely right. And then I would also add that those schools that focus on the sports programs and have this money coming in, I think you need to look at the athletes and where they are educationally and how well they do after the fact. Because at the end of the day, schools are they're businesses. They're trying to make money. So as long as you're bringing the money, I'm okay with you. I might get slapped on the wrist for having athletes that aren't at certain par, but you fix it and then you just forget about it again. My concern becomes for that athlete, because guess what? They're not all going to the NBA.
Exactly.
They're not all going to the NFL. They're not all going to wherever it is, and mostly it's NBA and NFL. They're not going to professional sports leagues. Not all of them. If you get one, you're very lucky. If you get two, you're extremely lucky. So then what happens to all those other people who have been recruited? And by the way, we've overlooked how well they're doing in class. This is not every athlete. There are some brilliant student athletes, but then there are some that we've overlooked how well they're doing in class because they can run with a ball or dribble a ball. And then it's like time to graduate, and what the hell happens then? So I think those schools are doing an extreme disservice because they are purely only interested in these students for how well they dribble or how they can carry a ball. And really, academics comes third, not even second, third.
It's interesting.
She's right. I mean, I can say, coming from a school that is known for its sports teams, that, at least during my time, and hopefully it's improved since then, that was definitely the case. Because, I mean, we did have a few during my era that made it to the NFL, that made it to the NBA, and had very successful professional careers, but those players were in the minority. So I always wondered, as a normal student, what happened to the athletes that played in college but didn't necessarily have the same emphasis placed on their academic success as they did on their winning games success. Because that's what brought money to the school. That's what brings attention to the school. When our teams would win bowl games, that comes with money and resources that go back to the school. I mean, I remember watching my freshman year, our football team won one of those bowls. I can't remember which one because there's a billion of them. Maybe the Gator Bowl or the Orange Bowl. I don't know. But we won it. And all I know is the next fall semester when we came back, there was brand new, facades on campus. So a lot of the streets had been repaved, new bricks had been laid down, and all of that money. So we were told, and I can't confirm this, was money that the school received as a result of the team winning the bowl.
Right.
So like Dr. Tachi said, at the end of the day, and I mean, no one should be naive to think otherwise, universities are businesses, number one. Education is their secondary function. The first is to be financially viable and fiscally solvent. So they're going to do things that are in their best interest to bring in finances. And if that means making sure that an athlete who may have injured himself is fixed so that he can play in the game, and if he has to skip a few classes, well, they're going to work with the professor to make sure that somehow that student still manages to pass, or they're going to get other students to be tutors for the players to help them stay up with their classmates. But I do think that it's a losing effort for those students that don't end up, the student athletes who don't make it to the big leagues, and most of them don't. So I always wonder, because you never hear about them. You know, they don't all become correspondents or work in sports medicine or become coaches or whatever. I always just wonder what becomes of them.
Right. I just want a few things. Divine Right saying, yes, Soror Tachi, some schools are graduating athletes that still aren't prepared for academically for the real world. Interesting, and we'll get, I know this gets into student athletes, and we're not going to chat about this. The only thing I'll add about is there is a gentleman, a college athlete from Duke University who played 1 year and left, and the NCAA right now is having hearings about athletics, etc. And his mother said flat out that what the NCAA does with its student athletes is slavery. Bottom line, yeah. Slavery.
I can see why you would say that, having watched the experience of some of my student athlete friends and what they went through. It did, in many ways, the whole process really does mirror the slave trade in terms of the way in which you go to, the way you're selected, the things that they look at. It definitely echoes of that.
Dr. Tachi, I want you to take, and it's interesting because I'm in Toronto in Canada, we don't have any institutions like this in our country. So looking as an outsider, has Black America in any way failed in its support of HBCUs?
That's a really, really good question, and it's a heavy question. I think yes, and I'm not just going to say HBCUs. I'm going to say all of our institutions in general, because once it was okay for us to sit next to non-melanated people, then we started to abandon the things that we had built because non-melanated ice is colder some way. So I think that way of thinking, that discourse trickles down to our institutions as well. So I think HBCUs are just one type of institution that has been failed by us as a whole, I would say. There's still overwhelming support for HBCUs. There are still students. The concept of HBCUs, regardless of what people want to happen, will not go away because there is still a need for HBCUs. The mission for many, is where I worked at Morgan State University before I moved here, and their mission really was whosoever shall come to be educated will do so. And this is where you see distinct differences between PWI'S and HBCUs in terms of the type of preparation that's there. There are some students that are not ready to be at a four-year university, and as such, there are some level of community college. There was some level of community college coursework that would help catch these students up to where they needed them to be. Because when they got to me in my class, I'm like, look, I don't have time to sit there and work with what you should have had. And you just don't. So that's why there's this go-between. So there will always be a need for that, simply because there's nothing in the system that really addresses it the way, to me, personally, that HBCUs do. So going back to the failure thing, I think yes, but I think that we can't just point at HBCUs as being failed by people of African descent. I think it's many of our institutions, because we continue to carry age-old attitudes of somebody's ice being colder. At the same time, I will say this, our institutions operate a lot, quite a bit, on legacy, and the fact that we will always survive because people always want the legacy of XYZ, whether it's our organizations, our social organizations, fraternities, sororities, our schools, And sometimes that causes us not to innovate. We keep things the way they were because they've always been that way, and we don't need to innovate because people will come because we are XYZ University. We educated such and such. Our such and such walked down the hall. Well, after a while, that's not good enough. So that's the other end of it. We also have to be open to innovation, to hearing new ways of thinking and hearing new voices, because that is the way that we will survive into the next millennium. So have we failed? Yes. But has some of the failure been by our own doing? Yes.
Lia, your take.
I agree with Dr. Chetachi in terms of, I don't know that Black community has completely abandoned these institutions, but I feel like largely they have, because I feel like I see this overall societal phenomenon now that our ancestors have fought for equality and fought for us to have these opportunities to go to whatever university we desire, to work in whatever field we desire. Now the attitude is less on how can what I do contribute to the larger community. It's on what can I do for me? What can I do for my own family? And we're losing this concept of community and social responsibility. So I feel like what's happening now is that people are just looking out for themselves and their immediate loved ones, if they even look that far. And so instead of investing money in an institution that could benefit thousands, they decide that they want to keep that money for themselves to do something else with it. Whatever that might be, something, it could be something altruistic, or it could be something as saving up for that new whip that they want to get. But I feel like the general attitude has shifted from the generations that fought to give us the right to choose and give us the ability to be in whatever university institution or whatever we want to be in. And so I do feel like there are families that do give back. Should be or could be. I don't even think people need to give back in the way in which some of our non-melanated counterparts do, like here's a new library. It could be just give $100 towards a scholarship. And if 10 of you give $100, that's $1,000. That's somebody's whole semester's worth of books. Or, you know, it doesn't have to be big moves. It can be small gestures. I mean, example, because it's where I went as an undergrad and it's what I know best. They created a scholarship called Our Time Has Come. And it's funded completely by Black and Latino alumni for current students. And people are so invested in this scholarship that it funds like up to 20 students, and I think they're increasing the numbers, that funds like the majority of their tuition. And I was a recipient of that scholarship, and now I'm a benefactor of it. I give money to it because I feel like, you know, I've benefited from the generosity of others, and now it's my turn to do my part to make sure that that opportunity exists for others. But sadly, what I'm seeing is that not everyone shares that mentality. The mentality that I see more and more, and I definitely see this more among younger generations, and I don't know why, is this, I'm going to do me. I'm going to take care of me. And, you know, if I do well, then maybe I can be somebody's role model, but that doesn't translate into them actually giving something that's of community benefit. And that's more what is concerning to me, is this turning away from institutions. I don't see youngsters being as interested in being involved in things like the Urban League or the NAACP or other organizations that uplift the Black community or create opportunities. The United Negro College Fund. I don't even know the last time I heard that organization being mentioned.
So Lia,
and that's
Lia, I just want to interrupt. Whose fault is that? What you're just describing right now, whose fault is that?
I think it's mostly the fault of the generation that falls between the 60s era and, you know, the youth of today. Because the generation that are the children of those activists benefited from their parents' activism, and then those benefits became the norm. And they don't appreciate as much the struggle because they didn't have to go through it. They only benefited from it. So I don't think there's that same level of consciousness amongst that generation. So they're raising now a generation of kids that I don't want to call them entitled, but I want to say that they don't have that perception of struggle because they've been given everything. And so for them, that's the norm. So they don't understand the cost that went into getting them the options that they had. And I blame, you know, that generation, you know, and even new parents now, because parents now, we still experience racism. There's still a gender wage gap. Women are still, and Black people are still not rising to leadership ranks across the board in the work world. And so obviously there's still work to be done, but I think people are settling for the crumbs. They don't know how to fight anymore. They don't want to be active. They don't want to stick their heads out. They just want to find their little piece of the pie, and that's enough.
So, Lee, on Dr. Tachi, I'm going to get you because I heard the about entitled, but I just want to read a comment here by Divine Right too. In fact, then when new ways of thinking happens at institutions, some who want it the old way do everything they can to get rid of the new innovative way of thinking to keep things the same. And then she also says, I look at what happened in Alabama with Reverend Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd. She had a positive, innovative way of thinking, and administration did everything to get rid of her. This is why we can't get ahead. So Dr. Tachi, two things. The whole area when you went about entitlement, because I heard that and saw that. And then I'm not familiar with the story of Dr. Boyd. So if you can share that with us too, because it sounds like it's a very important story to be heard.
Yes. So yes. Leah already summed it up in terms of this generation, well, the youth, millennials and Gen X that are coming up, and it's because this is why millennials are called the me generation, actually, because they've been taught that it's about them. So if you've been taught and have internalized that everything is about you, what incentive do you have to make it about the group, that everybody succeeds? None, because this is what you've been taught. Now, mind you, I don't excuse you. At some point, you're grown and you need to understand, but I do see where that comes from. So once you internalize that and you said, well, it's about me, and again, I teach millennials, so I definitely sat and watched behavior and said, "Oh, you really think that, huh?" I've sat and watched behavior, and I see where that comes from, and it's definitely from the parents. Now, the parents, again, as you said, Leah, like the generation before in the 60s, they wanted to make a better path and pave a better way. So the next generation became, benefited from it, but did not necessarily understand firsthand and may not have carried that activism or that spirit of activism on. And so then that next generation is like, I just want my kid to be, and instills no sense of social responsibility in them at all. Any sense of social responsibility that's gained is through exposure to that type of world. Now, again, let's not make a blanket case. This is not all millennials. This is not all Gen X. But as a group, as a whole, observing the behavior, this is why you can see where that kind of comes from. And then going to Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd. Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd, we all know, because she is a Delta. She happens to be, I can't remember which number president, but she was now also the national president of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She became the president of Alabama State, which is a historically black college. She was the first woman to become the president of Alabama State. If I'm not mistaken, I believe she is the first woman. And apparently there were myriads of problems. Now, I think those problems stem from people who like tradition to stay traditional, if that makes any sense. People like for things to be the way they were. But in our community, there's also a lot of misogyny. And I think a lot of misogyny is responsible for that. So when you have women who take the helm of leadership at our institutions because they have internalized the West's misogynistic ways, they then oppress the people that are already oppressed, which happens to be black women in this case. And I've seen so many, and you hear this all the time, of black women who have become like deans and provosts and presidents at their universities having problems with boards of trustees, etc. And that comes from old ways of thinking of women should not lead, men should be in the, and I think there's the bigger issue there is the misogyny with that. So that's what happened there to me.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Leah, on Tachi's comments?
No, not in that point. She covered it. It's true. Everything she said. In the case of Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd, it definitely was more misogyny, and then I think the fact that she was black made it worse.
Wow. Well, ladies, we're coming to an end of another epic conversation. As usual, I know it just flew. It just flew. I know. It just like flies by.
It did.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose you a question or a situation and how you'd respond to it, and then give some how can I say, calls to action when it comes to, especially people of our color, when it comes to HBCUs. So here's a scenario. I'm approaching each one of you and saying, I don't know if I should go to an HBCU or a PWI. And you can ask me questions if you want in real time to just get a thought process. And then we go for a few seconds and then give your closing thoughts on this subject. So first off, Ms. Lia, I'm approaching you and saying, Lia, I know you didn't go to an HBCU, but I'm thinking, I don't know which one to go to. What should I think about?
Well, the first thing I would like to know is, what is your area of interest? What do you want to study?
I would want to study, actually, both of you can ask questions in real time because Leah may take all of Tachi's questions. So we'll do a role play here, both of you, because I'd like to be in your classroom, both of your classrooms. So, sure, your classroom, right?
I think I see this happening. We're going to have professor.
Exactly. I want to study, I'm very passionate about helping black men, maybe doing social work and getting a degree in social work in order to help black men become better for themselves, their families, the community, the nation.
Okay, and then tell me a little bit about, where did you go to high school? Was it a diverse place? Did you have, good racial diversity, or did you feel like you were in a homogenous environment?
When I graduated from high school, there were 4 students of color in my graduating class of about probably 100.
Okay. And
Dr. Tachi, you can chime in here too, but I'm getting concerned because I see Dr. Tachi's feel. I'm going, I better get ready to duck in a moment. So keep on going, Leah.
All right, I'll ask one more and then I'll cede the floor to her and she can ask a few questions. I don't want to get too much into your parents' business because I'm talking to you as an aspiring college student.
Yep.
But do you think your parents can afford a college tuition?
I know, well, I'll give the answer.
Or do you think you'd be applying for financial aid or scholarships?
Well, my dad went to Howard University, and I know that, and he was a teacher for 38 years in the same classroom, so education is forefront in my parents' future for myself. They strongly believe in getting a great education. Now, he went to Howard, which was, yes, HBCU, but after he got to Howard, he was always I guess he was a real minority in his work environment. Let me put it that way.
Okay. I have some more questions, but I'll let Dr. Tachi chime in with her.
This. I hope you liked. I thought this would be a nice spin, a little role play.
It is. It's fun.
This is nice. This is fun. So, young man.
Yes.
You said that you went to high school and it was not very diverse.
Correct.
So let me ask you, do you think that going to an HBCU would be the answer to that lack of diversity?
Yes, because I feel through my experience in going to school up until this time, I have not found out enough about my people's history.
Interesting, but let me let you know that a lot of HBCUs are extremely diverse. They're not just blacks. There are not just black students that go there. There are students from all over the world, especially where your dad went, Howard University. It's extremely multi-ethnic and extremely multicultural. So even though black students or black culture is the focus, it is attended by students from everywhere around the world. So you're right. You would get diverse, but not just diverse in terms of black.
I would also add to, I agree with Dr. Tachi, but I would also say that you can also find that in terms of your community and also learning about yourself at a PWI that has an African American Studies program or a Canadian African American or Canadian African Studies program.
African Canadian.
That exists too. Afro-Canadian. And you can get that same information, that same sense of community, and still be taught by faculty of color as well, so that you can also have the perspective of someone who's lived it.
And Leah's absolutely right. What I would say, though, is at a PWI, if you're looking to have diverse faculty, you most likely will only find it in an African American Studies or Afro World or whatever they call it, or Latino Studies department, Asian Studies department.
Right. Okay.
Whereas faculties at HBCUs are diverse across the board, and you're going to be able to have faculty members that identify with your experience and take a personal stake in how well you do. So, not that you can't find that at a PWI, you absolutely can, but you will not find, and this is a fact, diverse faculty across the board like you would at an HBCU. So if that's something that's important to you, that's something that you may want to think about, because at the end of the day, you're also going to be looking for mentors. You should always find someone to help mentor you. Mentors can come in any shape, color, size, gender. It really doesn't matter. But it's helpful if this person can identify with your, identify with your experience, and you will find that at an HBCU across the board.
Well, thank you.
The other thing I would ask you, young man, too, one last question is,
yes,
because your father is a legacy of Howard, what do your parents think about you going there?
They would fully support it. I know my dad especially, because he was very proud of his experience. I had a conversation with him a few years ago, and to my surprise, when he went to Howard University, one of his instructors was Toni Morrison.
Oh, lucky man.
So I said, if that sort of exposure to my history I can get, that certainly would make me very enthusiastic to hopefully get to that environment. So there you go. Well, thank you for doing. It just came up in my mind to do something like that. Just off the cuff.
That's fun.
So I tell you, not only should you be professors in your own classroom, you also need to be guidance counselors to a lot of young people of color, because I think that conversation right there, if I just took that snippet and we share that with a lot of young people and parents, that would be such an incredible help.
Absolutely. Can I say one
please
quick thing?
Do. Please do.
I think that we have a hurdle that we have to get over. If we take everything away and all things being equal, and for some people it's wherever you're going to get the most financial aid, that's fine. For some people it's this institution has a world-class XYZ department, that's fine. For some people it's like they have a rowing team and I really want to be a rower, and that's fine. So you have to get in where you fit in and go where you feel the most comfortable. At the end of the day, it's about that. What I caution us to do is to denigrate our own institutions, because who is it hurting? Us. It is only hurting us. Because, okay, if you look at PWI'S and you look at, even though there are some that are very diverse, there are some that have I don't want to say a good handful, but have some people of color that are there, and they may form community. At the end of the day, when you look at those numbers compared to the amount of people that go to the school overall, it's still very minuscule. This is where HBCUs form a critical component of the educational experience, and we should not let that go. We definitely still need HBCUs. I can't stand when people ask, are they still needed? Absolutely, they're still needed, and I shouldn't have to defend to you, oh black one, why they're still needed. So I think we need to temper our conversations around HBCUs. Take a second look at them. When you go on, let me tell you what, really quickly, what got me exposed to HBCUs. It's not that the fact that my parents went to HBCUs, they did not. When I was in high school, people knew I was going to college, so the guidance counselors called me down every 5 minutes. So we have a scholarship there, because I used to bug them all the time, and not just mine, everybody's guidance counselor. So a guidance counselor who was not mine came and said, hey, there's an HBCU fair. So there were about 20 of us that they put on a bus and took us to a local college, and it was a fair of every single HBCU in the United States. From Rust College to Barbara Scotia to, of course, Howard. That was my first exposure to HBCUs. So I think if we start doing things like that, continuing, and not just pushing the Ivy Leagues, because we're guilty of that, and not just pushing the Big Ten, not just pushing the state school, not just pushing the local school, give them exposure to everything and let them make the decision, and don't downplay certain schools because you think they're less than.
Especially if you don't know anything about it because you've never gone or no one in your family has gone. You can't talk about what you don't know.
Girl, I can't stand that. I'm so sorry.
I can't stand that. Dr. Tachi, I think HBCUs in conjunction with all each other should hire you to market.
Totally.
I'm serious. They should hire you. Bang. They'd see the numbers go up, 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 up. Absolutely.
Well, then we also have to do our part to make sure that we retain. So
absolutely. Well, ladies, as usual, Black Lady Magic happened again on Wednesday night. Have to thank both of you and us. Dr. Tachi, you took it up a whole other level tonight, and I really appreciate that. You were on fire tonight. Both of you were on fire. But Dr. Tachi, So, before we let these ladies go, first of all, Leah, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
They can reach me in a variety of ways. If you look for me on Facebook, you can find me as Lia World Traveler. That's LIAWORLDTRAVELER. You can also find me at the same name, LiaWorldTraveler.com, which is my blog. You can find me on Instagram as Lia World Traveler. You can find me on Twitter at Lia World Travels. And you can find me on LinkedIn as Leah Miller. And those are where I'll be.
Good stuff. And Dr. Tachi.
So, myriad of ways for me as well. I do a show called Mediascope every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time now, Eastern Daylight Time, on Periscope and Facebook Live. And then right before that, at 5 p.m., I do the pre-show, pre-party on Instagram. So you can reach me on Instagram at Dr._Tachi. Or you can watch the pre-show. You can reach me on Twitter at Tachiada, which is TACHIADA, one of my favorite platforms. You can also, by the way, watch Mediascope in my Twitter feed. I'm on Periscope at Tachiada. Facebook is the Mediascope page, and that's Mediascope. Just look for it, or facebook.com/Mediascope16. So basically, I'm some form of Tachi or Tachiata everywhere.
Wonderful. I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, host of Epic Conversations outside of Mediascope, and the home of Epic Conversations. If you want to catch replays of my YouTube conversations, you're at the right place. If you're not there, then when you go to YouTube, just put in the search engine, the space, DR period space, VIBE space, SHOW, audio replays, the Dr. Vibe Show, THEDRVIBESHOW.com, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Tuned In Radio, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, and I'm working on another platform to hear replays audio-wise that I'm going to talk to Dr. Tachi about after.
Okay.
That it will definitely put us ahead of the curve. So yes, we like to be ahead of the curve. Certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching Communications. Reach out to me in regards to that on Twitter at DRVIBESHOW, email dr.vibe at the DRVIBESHOW, or go to my website, go to the top, click on Contact the Dr. Vibe Show. Gives you 3 ways to contact me. Brand ambassador for the only online magazine dedicated to African Americans in food, wine, and travel. Cuisine Noir magazine, website cuisinenoirmag.com. If you are a business or entrepreneur wanting to get media promotion, I run a service called gettingmediacoverage.com. Touch base with me on that. 3 last things I'd like to share. Well, 4. First of all, we have to thank Divine Right. Hello, Divine Right. On fire. And she did say dynamic discussion once again. Thank you all. And she said, yes, they would be excellent guidance counselors. So there's many careers ahead for you ladies. 3 last things. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. And finally, block assumptions. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. Thanks for watching live on the replay. And hopefully we'll get them back soon again because they're making Wednesday nights epic. God bless. Yay. Peace be well and keep the faith. Bye-bye.
Bye.